Welcome to number 21 of Travelling in the Footsteps of Isabella Bird. And of course, if you haven't been following it and you've just jumped in at this point, well, go to lawrencegray.net/travel with a capital T /blog -2 or -2 or -2, you know, not the long dash at the bottom, but the little dash in the middle. That's the one. Anyway, that's where you should go if you want to find out what the whole sequence is all about, and you can start at number 1 and work your way through to the end. And don't forget to subscribe and pass on and share and all that sort of nonsense. I'll remind you again later on, because apparently we've got to keep on reminding people to do that. Right, now then, where are we up to now? She's now going to Kuala Kangsar. That's Isabella Bird. In 1879, is touring the Malay native states. These have recently become under the protection of the British Empire, if that's the right word. And, well, you should, follow the whole thing and you'll see what I mean. And she's been hanging around in Taiping, visiting the gambling halls and getting rather friendly with Robert Sandiland Froud Walker. What a name that is, Robert Sandiland Froud Walker. Captain Robert Sandiland Froud Walker. He had a really distinguished military career ahead of him, and he was badass, as they say in the other colonies, the ones we lost. Well, anyway, he was the sort of chap that Isabella rather liked, and so she sort of went on journeys with him, hunting largely, shooting snipe and tigers and crocodiles and other things that she couldn't remember the name of. Anyway, this time she's going off to Kuala Kangsar. Kuala Kangsar is the new capital, or at least the capital's of Perak's been moved here because this place the British are building as a sultanic palatial residential zone, so to speak. If you go there now, you find on the hill is all the Sultan's lands and his buildings and palaces and so on, and down the bottom of the hill is the Chinese town full of all the shops and stuff, and the Kentucky Fried Chicken outlets. In fact, well, Kentucky Fried Chicken wasn't quite there when she was there, but they were selling the equivalent. In fact, right from the beginning, the Malay cuisine did rather like deep fried chicken, and they put a crust on it, and it was probably not too dissimilar to the Colonel's output, even back in 1879. And you can go there now, and this is what you see, and of course the palace area, palatial area, and even the mosques. Sultan Obadiah Mosque. That was built by an Englishman, and a mosque designed by the English. In fact, when the English designed mosques in Malaysia, they thought, we'll make them proper mosques. These Malay mosques with their sort of wooden atap top buildings and pointy bits up there. They didn't look like real mosques. Real mosques had to have domes and gold and stuff, squirrely bits, just like in India, where they had real mosques in India. Goodness. Whereas here, they were all a bit plain, and some of them looked rather Chinese, quite frankly, and Siamese even. They didn't quite look like what the British thought was an Arabian dream. So the British built the Sultan Obadiah Mosque, and spectacular it is to this day. In fact, mosques built nowadays do have this, because they've got a lot of Arab money going into it from the Saudis building the mosques. They tend to look more sort of like Saudi mosques now. But Well, you could do an entire tour of Malaysia, just looking at the architecture of the mosques and get a sort of a hint of what the influences are coming through at various stages of their history and various sort of local histories which don't quite run on the same sort of track lines as the Malay history as a whole. It's, you know, there's a lot of differentiation here. Anyway, I'm getting carried away by architecture. And so, you know, you go to Kuala Kangsar and you'll see the Ubudaya Mosque built by the British, of course. It doesn't quite have Rule Britannia in Arabic on it, but, you know, there's a certain frisson of that going on there. Because one of the things is that the new Sultanate of Perak sans Sultan Abdullah he'd sort of disgraced himself and they'd kicked him out to the Seychelles. The new Sultan, Sultan Yusuf, nobody liked him. Well, so anyway, they wanted to give him a little bit of prestige, but they still called him the temporary Sultan because nobody liked him. He was reputed to have boiled one of his slave girls alive, which, you know, was a bit kind of naff, wasn't it, really, when you comes down to it. You know, I know it's a local cultural thing and you're supposed to respect it, but, you know, it does kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth when you're dealing with these sort of characters. But, you know, politics is politics, and sometimes you just have to suck it up. So she was decided to go to Kuala Kangsar on an elephant. Isabella's journey on an elephant to Kuala Kangsar was not a success. The seat that she had kept slipping off and rolling round, and they had to keep tightening it up. The mahout was smoking and kept stopping and chatting with locals. Every time you saw somebody get off the elephant and run over to them, and they stand and they smoke and witter away, and the elephant would roam aimlessly around, grabbing vegetation and eating it and groaning and trying to get rid of this damn woman stuck on its back and so on. And eventually it did actually just roam off into the mud and wallow and snort water and squirt it all over her. So she was not in a good state of mind. You know, her Isabella and any other animal but horses seems to have had a bit of an issue. And she says, there was nothing grand about my elephant, but his ugliness. In fact, she calls everything ugly, a beast. She doesn't really have the vocabulary of the jungle, so to speak. A monkey is an ape, a monkey a thing, you know, and anything sort of with two eyes lurking in the depth of the jungles is a tiger. That's probably the only name that she knew of any of the flora and fauna here, and she wasn't terribly interested in it. If you can't eat it or shoot it and eat it, then shoot it, eat it, or ride it. That's basically her idea of what nature has to hold. Anyway, I'll just read you what she says here further. And then, going to a mud hole, he threw all the water out of it, squirted it with a large noise over himself and his riders, soaking my clothes with it. Yes. Well, you know, quite frankly, the only good animals for her are those in zoos where she can poke them with a stick. You know, or the ones that she's shooting with, Sandiland Froude Walker. Yes, Robert Sandiland Froude Walker. He's just lurking in the background there. So, anyway, she's off to see old Hugh Lowe, who's the resident there, and he's having problems with Sultan Yusuf. You know, Sultan Yusuf's well, he was a descendant of an earlier sultan, so he had some kind of claim to the throne, but nobody liked him. But he did have a rather enterprising son-in-law called Raja Idris, and the son-in-law was part of the the ruling committee that had been set up by the British, and these two just constantly squabble over whose opinion really mattered. And this is, well, where you get the idea of divide and rule. Not that Perak wasn't divided and before the British came along and so on, but right this moment, this division between the only two people who vaguely had royal connections that supported the British and were right from the beginning in their in favour of their intervention, so to speak, or at least indifferent towards it. These two, they didn't see eye to eye at all, and Hugh Lowe took advantage of that to get some of his opinions accepted by the council. But this is the thing about Sir Hugh Lowe, was that he was woke, in the local terms. I mean, he could see that. He thought that Western society was vaguely corrupt and hypocritical, and one shouldn't really judge other cultures at all. One should just accept them, which is, the traditions of other people, like boiling the odd slave girl and enslaving people for generations because of some peculiar debt that they could never pay off anyway, so which has been organised by being forced upon them, even. He thought one should tread gently on these little peculiarities of local culture. He would have been considered to be very woke nowadays, and maybe he would have even been green. I know he probably went snipe shooting as well. In fact, if you get a textbook on Malay, one of the first things that you learn is this is a textbook I got hold of when I first arrived in Malaysia. Actually did have sentences that told me how to say things like, "Boy, fetch my snipe gun. Make sure it has got all the ammunition that I need for today's hunting." Very useful. Right, so Yusuf, now then, he was constantly challenged by Raja Idris's leadership for the State Assembly, and I guess Hugh Lowe rather identified with that. There's perhaps what he could talk about with old Raja of temporary Sultan Yusuf. He'd probably say, my son-in-law, Pope John Hennessy. What was his name? John Pope Hennessy. John Pope Hennessy, yes. He actually suspended me from my position in Labuan for immorality and handing out jobs to the brothers of my Malay mistress. We've got things in common here. We're men of the world. We've done things. And John Pope Hennessy actually has a road named after him in Hong Kong, so he went off to be a Hong Kong governor in the future. So Hugh Lowe, I've mentioned this before, he lived in a rather comfortable position. He lived in a large Malay house. And this is the place where Isabella stayed, and so it must have been quite a large and rambling one to give her rooms as well. But these places were designed for the environment. What breeze there was could blow through them. What rubbish that one had could fall through the slats in the floor, and you could sweep that away into the distance, and hopefully hope that the animals below could eat it all or take it away, or the servants or whatever would keep it reasonably clean. So everything was designed to make life easy. Well, they were easy to repair because you just get a bit of palm and stick it up here and stick it up there and bang a bit of wood in here. So they did eventually get a kind of weird ramshackle nature to them, but they could be quite highly polished, and especially once you put your billiard table in there and a few knickknacks around of family photos and what have you, you can make them a home from home. And old Hugh Lowe, he made it a home from home, but his home was Labuan, and he rather seems to have lived quite well in a kind of a Malay way, which does make you think that maybe his Malay mistress was there running the household, because he certainly didn't have any troubles getting food and other such items that Emily Innes complains about. His staff would know what to do. So, and of course he had these other relationships where financial side of things was all sorted out as well, rather interestingly. So when you look at this guy, he had the big mutton chop, beards and hats and buttoned up clothes and he would have a, I don't know, walk with there's a photo of him with a pig sticking spear, the sort of thing that the Indian troops used to use for exercise and sport, and pig stickers, go hunting wild boar with these things. Whether he used it for that, I don't know, or whether he just happened to think it looked cool in the photograph. It allowed him to stand proudly long enough without falling over whilst they took their picture, because he's waiting, he can't breathe. Yes, and it's done. Finally, the picture's done. So you kind of see these pictures, and they all had this pose where they stood with one foot out in front of them and holding something. Sandilands Froude Walker did the same thing. They often put a hand behind there. There's a sort of a pose like that. It's one of the things is if you've got your hat on to keep the sun off, you have to raise. You can see the guys in the photographer saying, "Can you look up, because I want to be able to see your eyes." So the hat comes up like that, so they're all looking like that. So this is the British dress code in those days was quite actually a thing. Despite living out in the tropics here, if you wanted to be seen in public in any sort of way possible, you had to dress up with collars and ties and what have you. Otherwise, you'd be seen as unrespected, giving disrespect to others. Hence, Isabella Bird getting rather, hot under the collar, seeing someone dressed in a check shirt. Well, I've mentioned that before, but this is what bugged her, and yet her dress sense was rather strange, with white towel down her back to and pantaloons tied up so she could ride the horses and so on, and keep the mosquitoes off, of course. So she was pretty buttoned up in her travels, not terribly colourful, but there must have been something about her, because she did attach herself to these guys who paraded around, showed her around. Maybe they just knew that, wanted to get a good write-up from her, or something like that. Or she was actually an interesting person. Always a possibility that Isabella Bird was an interesting person to be with. She would chatter on about her travels, I'm sure, and what her plans were. And I'm pretty certain that conversation with her was, well, not like these other ladies who knew nothing and would swoon, faint. You just had to feed them a bit of whiskey, She was not the typical Victorian lady and got on with the boys. Right, so what have we got here? Right, oh yes, now she has dinner with Mr. Lowe, or at least she thinks she's going to have dinner with Mr. Lowe. She's staying at his place, and so she assumes he's going to be looking after her, and so she goes for dinner, and this is what she writes about her dinner. I was assured by the servant that the meal was served, and I sat down, much mystified, at the well-appointed table, when he led in a large ape and a small one, and a Sikh brought in a large retriever and tied him to my chair. I am inclined to think that Mr. Lowe is happier among the Malays and among his apes and other pets than he would be among civilized Europeans. Well, there's a lot going underneath that. Well, for a start, she just calls them apes and big ape and a little ape. Could it be an orangutan? Could it be a lagor? Could it be a gibbon of some sort? Well, we don't know. She never actually tells. They just make oof noises apparently and squabble amongst themselves, and they were eating things from a plate. And she does know the name of the dog. It's a retriever. And that, of course, is the sort of dog that you take with you when you go snipe hunting. You always need your retriever to get it to get the snipe. So that's something. But probably every other dog's just a dog. Like I said, she didn't really have that much interest in the flora and fauna, but there is this kind of feeling that she's been snubbed, left on her own, and ignored. And obviously, he's more at home with the apes and the Malays. That's an interesting juxtaposition. There's some rather than civilized people. What everyone says about Isabel Bird, outright racism is probably not there as such. She does go to great lengths to kind of push that aside and try and tell people that we're not dealing with savages here, and yet at the same time there is a sense of civilized Europeans, and then the people that she does like are not the most civilized human beings. It's the wild men. Yeah, they're the sexiest kind, and many of these people they sought out areas that were wild. They didn't much care for that civilization. In fact, she spent an awful lot of her time trying to get away from civilization. That's an interesting kind of thing about these European adventurers. On the one hand, they were out to civilize, but on the other hand, they were very uncertain as to why they should. In fact, Frank Swetterman, who I really will do another set of series that talks about him. He said that our job here is we should be reminded we're here to help the Malays, not to change them. We're here to we're here because this is the Malay land. We're at their service. He paid a lot of lip service to it anyway. He was also in the business of helping himself to all sorts of other things. But as you can see, he too had modernization was not about European values, and that's something that I find interesting. I never quite expected to find these people. It was about drains, putting drains in. It was about clearing out the malaria swamps. It was about health. It was about education. It was about being able to look after yourself in this new globalized economy where the steam engine and the telegraph were connecting people, and people were demanding more and more of other people's resources so that they could build up their own countries. The masses could get good clothing, the masses could get good education, the masses could get good housing. So you need more and more resources, and it was all about kind of bringing those resources in, but at the same time not exploiting people. But I say at the same time not exploiting. They didn't mind exploiting that, certain people, but they always had, there was a little frisson of guilt crept into it, especially with the British administrators that were sent out. They spent an awful lot of time trying to protect the locals against the rapacious industrialists and capitalists that came out there. In Sarawak, the Brooks family were always accused of keeping the locals in as some sort of zoo, so that untouched by the Western industrial society and so forth, and it was harmful to them. So who knows? Was it harmful or not? I don't know. Did they need protection? I don't know. Well, I've no idea. At the time, I can see how the logic that sort of logic would prevail. Nowadays, we're sort of uncertain about these things, and there's a lot of critique of the old colonial eras. are really after the event without understanding the processes involved and being blind to what is, in effect, the same processes going on now. One could say China's now become the great colonialists. They would deny it because this is different, it's a socialist state. Maybe it is, but you see the same things going at war. The same forces just wafting over all of society all the time, constantly, and judging one era by the values of another era is almost stupid when it comes down to it, because we can't really judge those eras in the same way, because they're not the same as us. So if you're going to be truly woke, you should also say these are cultural things that we try to understand. You can't change them; it's all come and gone. Just in the same way as we're looking at the different cultures, trying to find ways of communicating without destroying the strengths behind these things. Of course, boiling the odd slave girl, that's a bit of the culture that one should try and get rid of. So there's always room for improvement on every score. So, Isabella, right. So, I think that's it for this one. She's having our dinner with the apes. And we're coming into going to be the last episode very soon. Number 22. The last episode. I'll see you on the last episode. So, look, subscribe. Oh, what did it say? Look, subscribe. I don't know. Subscribe, share, comment. My mind has gone blank. I've forgotten what it is. Look, shares, comment, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. Remember, you find all of this things at lawrencegray.net/travel with a capital T. And I shall see you at the last episode. Bye.